Do you want to see what it's like being a first responding officer to a crime scene? If your answer is yes, then you came to the right place. This will be a two-part video. The first part being the information by the books, and the second part being what I would do in this situation of being the first responding officer to a crime scene. Welcome to an informational video on how a first responding officer will respond to a crime scene. Before arriving to a crime scene, the most important thing in my opinion is your notebook. This is very important because you write down evidence of what happened. And just remember, just because it does not seem important, it's better to have it written down than to not have it at all. Here's some information you didn't know about your notebook and what to do with your notebook. Every page should be numbered in proper order. Use only blue or black ink. Every line or every page of an issue notebook should be written on or crossed out with a single line and an initial to prevent entries from being written afterwards. No page should be removed from the notebook. Once a notebook entry is made, it should never be altered or amended in any way. Errors made at the time of writing the notebook should be struck through with a line and initial. Notes must always be made at the time of the observation or event, or as soon as afterwards as practicable. Notes must be completed before going off duty. A cover page should also be included to which an officer enters information such as the following: name, rank, badge number, police service unit or department, handcuff serial number, sidearm number, date of entry, and date of last entry. Now that we covered the one thing you have control over before going to a crime scene or reporting to the location, let's discuss a crime scene and information you need to know. What is a crime scene exactly? A crime scene means any location where one or more of a series of events involved in the commission or a crime occurred, which includes any location where a crime was actually committed, any location where evidence of a crime is located, any location where evidence of the crime is known to have been previously located. There are also objectives for the police officer during the investigation. These include to confirm that a crime occurred, confirm that a crime occurred in the manner in which it was reported. If a crime occurred, identify the appropriate criminal charges, identify the victim or victims, identify the person or persons responsible for the event or crime, and arrest and charge the person or persons responsible, identify and interview possible witnesses to the event or crime, reconstruct the event, assess all available evidence to determine the true facts of the crime scene or event, collect information and gather evidence to prove the facts regarding the crime, which is actus reus, and document the circumstances of the event or crime and present them fairly in the appropriate judicial proceeding. Now that you are informed as what the crime scene is, let's do the security of the scene. The top priority is to ensure the preservation of life. The first officer is in charge of controlling the scene. A good officer is capable of multitasking and to take actions to secure the scene. These are the steps to be followed when being the first responding officer at the crime scene. Prior to exiting your vehicle, you should request dispatch to obtain the assistance of however many additional officers necessary to help manage the scene. Stabilize matters as quickly as possible. Instruct the dispatch to notify persons such as your supervisor, identification officers, and if need be, medical personnel like an ambulance. As mentioned in your title, your main priority is to preserve life. You need to respond immediately to the injured and ensure that you keep others from being injured. You should always obtain the names, addresses, and telephone numbers of potential witnesses. If there is two responding officers, one should begin to secure the scene. As new officers come to the scene, you should assign one officer to stay and monitor the injured. That officer should also gather information from injured to pass on to you. Assign another officer to stand guard over the evidence to prevent contamination until the forensic team shows up. Obtain information from witnesses regarding the person responsible for the offense. If the suspect has already left before you got there, it is suggested to prepare a rough sketch of the crime scene in your notebook to depict the location of any evidence. Create a scene security register to record the identity and arrival time of everyone who entered the crime scene after you got there. If the suspect is present at the crime scene, the suspect must be removed from the crime scene as soon as possible. In the event the suspect used a firearm or any evidence on his or her hands, he or she shall not be allowed to wash his or her hands. Clothing and footwear may be needed to be seized for trace evidence. Hair and biological samples may be needed for comparison purposes. Never allow any suspect to be removed from a crime scene. Never allow any suspect who has been removed from a crime scene to re-enter the crime scene for any reason without the consent of the officer in charge of the investigation to prevent further contamination of the crime scene. If you are the first responding officer, you should not rush into a crime scene examination. An investigator alongside forensic personnel need to formulate a plan called an investigation plan, a scene investigation plan, first. Therefore, you should just block off the scene until this is done. This plan includes area to be searched, items to be searched for, specialized investigative techniques / equipment to be employed, sequence of examination, personnel requirements, potential hazards, and legal search requirements. Under the Police Service Act of Ontario, police officers have a common law authority to investigate investigate crime, and enforce the law. There are no legal search requirements to search a crime scene unless the officer is known to have some control over it, the offender is known to have some control over it, or property interest in it. For example, if a store owner calls the police to report a break and enter, he or she is consenting for police to enter the premises to investigate. Common law authorizes first responding officers at violent crime scenes to enter without warrant or perform a search for victims, offenders, and weapons to ensure officer safety. Officer safety considerations at the crime scene is imperative. Security of the officer searching a crime scene needs to be enforced to prevent the suspect from returning to the crime scene and presenting a hostile situation for investigating officers. There's also 4 types of warrantless searches to know before responding for first responding officers. These include search with consent, search in plain view, exigent circumstances, search incident to arrest. And now here's part 2. This is what I would do if I was a first responding officer at a crime scene. The steps I would take when arriving to the scene are, before leaving my vehicle, I would radio in for support. I would get a description of the area, the amount of people to determine how many officers will be needed. I will always have my notebook ready to write down all the information. I will write this down, how many officers I asked for, address of the location, the time I arrived, etc. Everything I could think of. Everything and anything helps. You will not run out of paper. You will run out of memory. So it is better to look at what you write down than to try and remember something you thought was not important. When leaving your vehicle, I would assess the area and people. Is the offender or suspect still there? Is he armed? Should I be worried about being injured? If not, look for anyone that is injured and care for them. Make sure they are okay. If they're able to handle themselves until the ambulance comes, or do I have to attend to them? Will a witness step up and help the injured so I can continue my steps? After helping the injured, or if there is none, I would connect with the witnesses. I need their personal information so I can contact them in the future. If they're able to stay around, if I am in a hurry to secure the crime scene so I can get their information after I do so, I would then continue to secure the crime scene. Block it off from any other person that is not an officer or anyone else likewise. I would not examine the crime scene. I would wait for an investigator and forensic team to come. I would make sure that there is no suspect in the crime scene hiding anywhere. If there's a suspect, I would ensure my safety and the safety of others in the scene. I would have to remove him as quickly as possible from the scene and put him under arrest while reading him their rights. You know the famous lines you always hear officers give suspects in movies when they're cuffing them? Those are the lines I am talking about. I would check for any evidence on the suspect, for example, weapons, blood on hands, clothing. I would then proceed to put the suspect in the back of my vehicle to secure the safety of myself and others. After doing this, I will attend to finding out more information about the situation until more help arrives at the scene. I would ask victims questions if possible, or witnesses. I will always be writing down the information I have. When help arrives, I will properly direct them on what to do. For example, have an officer attend to securing the injured, have an officer stand over the crime scene to protect it, have an investigating officer and forensic unit into the crime scene to investigate it. If there is any news any news reporters trying to get information, I will provide them with nothing. I will strictly inform them that they are allowed in public areas, but they are not to intervene with my investigation, or there will be consequences. They are not allowed to do anything to jeopardize the investigation of the crime scene. And that is all. Thank you.